so starting off with GBPUSD, the first thing we'll notice is that the trend has actually been bullish for a while, okay? And if we pay attention to the most recent price action, price actually tapped into this fair value gap here. And we can see the huge rejection that was left behind as this candle failed to close below this fair value gap, okay? So essentially price broke structure to the upside, retraced into this fair value gap, left this huge rejection behind, and since then, we've basically been pushing up, all right? So GBPUSD is simply bullish at the moment, although I would watch out for this high here, and perhaps this high as well, because once this high gets taken, liquidity gets taken with it, and there's always the potential that, of course, we could just keep expanding to the upside for a while before we get any retracement, or potentially we could even leave a fair value gap behind after today, break this high, and get a framework, the functional framework for a potential retracement back into this fair value gap and then move upwards, okay? So for this week, at the moment, we're bullish, right? All guns go, whatever your system is, we're bullish. But we could also within this week see a retracement scenario. So you might just want to keep an eye out for that. If you scale down to the 4-hour time frame, first thing we're going to see is this is our horizontal level, okay? And we also have a fair value gap as well. We kind of have what seems to be liquidity being manufactured above this level. So you could potentially frame a trade from here or from here, whatever your system is or however you trade. Of course, we could also have price just keep impulsing to the upside. Because if we actually take a look at this daily candle, yeah, it was actually really impulsive. Okay, so there's a potential that price might just have a shallow retracement and then continue in an impulsive leg upwards. So that is something that could potentially happen as well, perhaps even today. All right. And if that does happen, it does leave behind the fair value gap we talked about earlier. So just keep that in mind. All right. So GBPCAD. When we take a look at GBPCAD, I think the most significant bit of price action from the past we see is this, right? So we had this accumulation here, and then price kind of manipulated, right? And since then we've been expanding to the upside. Okay, so we know that we're bullish. We have taken this high, however, but we did so with a really impulsive candle, an extended range candle. And just like with GBPUSD, there's a potential for a shallow retracement and a continuation to the upside. However, even if that does happen, we would leave a fair value gap behind. So potentially within this week, we might actually be looking to catch a retracement framework, perhaps back into this fair value gap, which might manifest next week. All right. So the important thing is to look at the week and see what phase of price action you're in and see if your system allows you to capitalize on that phase of price action the best that you can. If we scale down to the 4-hour time frame, our horizontal level is this, and we have a few fair value gaps here as well. Okay, so if potentially you're looking to catch that shallow retracement, right? Because you already have the daily framework of bullishness, right? You could potentially even be catching that shallow retracement within this 4-hour fair value gap here. All right. So let's just scale down and look at what we could potentially have in that regard. So when we scale down to the lower time frame, And yes, the 1 hour is the lower time frame for me. We can see what seems like a fair bit of liquidity being manufactured. Okay. So potentially we could end up sweeping this liquidity, tapping into that 4 hour fair value gap we talked about earlier, and seeing a move manifest. Potentially that could happen. Also, could just see price push up, maybe use this horizontal level to then push further up. So whatever your system is, whatever you're looking for, the fact of the matter is that GBPCAD at the moment is bullish. So let's quickly take a look at Euro GBP, a pair that doesn't move a lot, but when it does, oh my God, I love it. So yeah, just looking at this, we can just see right off the bat, this fair value gap on the daily time frame. Price has tapped into it, and for the past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days, price failed to close once above this fair value gap. And since then, we've practically been kind of displacing to the downside. So when we scale down to the 4 hour time frame, for me, the most significant level is at this point. I do have a system around how I pick my levels. However you pick your levels, it's fine. Yeah, so we can see even this kind of like temporary trend here. So I think we could potentially look to take these lows, right? These lows here, okay? But at the moment, can see price kind of consolidating. You'll be able to see that a bit more on the lower time frame. So we could potentially see a manipulation into a level, a fair value gap or a horizontal level, whichever one, and potentially a push downwards. So personally, that's how I'm framing my trade. You don't have to do it that way, but Euro GBP is bearish. So GBP JPY, that this one's a bit tricky, right? Because when we look at it, I think the most significant bit of price action that we can immediately see is price having swept this trend line liquidity, right? Trend line liquidity, price swept. And now it looks as though GBP JPY might be getting ready for a potential rally to take out these highs, right? So even though it looks like a bearish scenario, it kind of looks like a trap, if you ask me. But if we're paying attention to current price action, price did sweep liquidity at this point, after which we then started to break down to the downside. And we did this in reference to price actually hitting a fair value gap on the daily time frame, which is a really good sign. It's a really good sign of bearish momentum. However, if we look at these candles here, we've kind of been consolidating for a while, and we do have, some areas of interest potentially up there. So when we scale down to the lower time frame, which is the 4 hour in this case, I think that for this week, you might be a bit safer potentially seeing if you can frame some bullish ideas, because if we look at the 4 hour, we can see that there's kind of been a shift in structure, and we see this low here actually held when price came into it, and we saw this huge week and kind of like an expansion again to the upside. So if we're looking at this particular frame here to potentially target those levels on the upside, currently we have this fair value gap here on the 4 hour, this fair value gap here. And when we scale down to the lower time frame, we can kind of see price starting to kind of form, some really good price action around this. We had this trend line liquidity swept. I don't trade the Asian session. I don't think it's high probability. We've had kind of like, again, this mini consolidation here swept into this fair value gap. This move could potentially happen during London. I'm not really, according to my rules and confirmations, I'm not really seeing a high probability scenario yet. So I'm still waiting, but yeah, I would love to take some short-term buys from this particular leg of price action. I think it's safe to frame some bullish ideas from here if your system allows for that. Okay, so moving on. GBPCHF, we have a very similar scenario with GBPCHF, very, very similar. We've swept liquidity. It's looking as though price might rally to potentially take these highs or reach for some levels higher up. Okay, if we look at this, we see that price consolidated for a while. We've swept this liquidity and it seems as though we're expanding a bit to the upside, even though that expansion isn't really evident as yet. But I think that the best trades you can catch are the ones you catch while the move is still subtle. So pay attention and listen to the market. Breathe, all right? So yeah, I think we're bullish, and I think that we are going to be targeting these low-hanging fruits, if you will, within this week potentially. So we'll move on to USDCAD. When we look at USDCAD, the most significant thing that we can see is all of this liquidity here, right? We had this accumulation, manipulation, and now price has basically broken down to the downside. We see a lot of displacement, right? So a lot of fair value gaps left behind. If we do take our discount and premium levels, we'll see that price is still a bit far from getting into this premium zone, which would be ideal. At the moment, I'm not really seeing a reaction that I kind of like. So I'm still looking at some potential zones, right? A bit further up to possibly have a bearish continuation, right? That might not even happen this week. Again, pay attention to the week that you are in, to how the days align with the whole narrative of the week. When we scale down to the lower time frame, what we're going to immediately see is price sweeping all of this liquidity here, and we've left this huge fair value gap here behind conveniently. And also, it seems as though we've been manufacturing liquidity conveniently above this fair value gap. So we might end up seeing a scenario like this and having a huge buy move play out. I hope that it happens within your session, and I hope that your system potentially allows you to catch that. Okay, so moving on to AUDUSD. I think that at the moment, AUDUSD is probably the cleanest bit of price action that we have, because on the daily time frame, we swept liquidity and we've been expanding to the upside, right? And again, at this point, we've swept liquidity again. So within this larger bit of price action here, we are having this bit of price action that could frame our most profitable trade for the week. I actually already took a trade yesterday. I mentioned that in the video that I tried to make that didn't really work out. So I'm really sorry about that. But yeah, if you look at this, we see that price taps into this fair value gap, left the week behind, failed to close below, and we're expanding to the upside. All right. Now let me just talk a bit about the trade that I took on the 4-hour time frame. Okay, let's just scale down to the 1 hour time frame. So on the 1 hour time frame, I actually did take a trade from this point. All right. And at the time of making this video, I think that the trade was still somewhere around here. But yeah, I do go for 1:3 with all of my trades. So yeah, actually the trade has played out already. But the thing that I really want to point out is this high here and potentially this high here. And I want to point that out because, as you can see, while we may end up impulsing for a while, and I really do believe that we're not really going to take a break till we take this high, do consider the fact that we will be leaving fair value gaps behind. So whether within this week, depending on how fast price moves, or next week, we could potentially be framing an idea around some retracement into the levels that we will be leaving behind. So try your best to align yourself with the week that we're in. Okay, so let's look at US30. Actually caught a really good swing trade on US30 last week and lasted about 3 days, I think. And yeah, that was really nice. But when we look at US30, we'll see that we swept this liquidity here. We swept one final liquidity here and started expanding to the upside. All right. So US30 is bullish. It is. Do pay attention to the fact that we've taken this high, which means that we've taken enough liquidity for a potential retracement. So while price might actually continue, right, we could be looking at a scenario where we might frame some retracements for this week into the levels that we left behind, the fair value gaps that we've left behind on the daily time frame. So whatever your system allows, if you're someone who can trade retracements, I think you should look out for that. If you're someone who can aggressively trade continuations and you're confident, I do have a set of rules that allow me to identify when a price might actually continue to push to the upside. So if you do have that, then yeah, I think that you could use that. Finally, we have gold. Okay. Now with gold on the normally I don't like marking out my horizontal levels on the daily time frame, but I think that this is the most significant horizontal level that we have. We also do have a fair bit of fair value gaps that we've left behind. If gold is going to continue to impulse to the upside, then it's very likely that we will be taking a reaction from this and potentially moving upwards. However, because of how much space we've left behind and the price kind of looks a bit overbought, we might actually have a framework that might allow us to take some retracements for this week into these levels. So just pay attention to that. And yeah, if you've seen this video up to this point, please like, comment, and subscribe. And thank you for tuning in. I hope you have a great week, guys. Bye.